the five kingdoms. We're just looking here at the essential characteristics, outstanding characteristics of the five kingdoms. And I know, there's a whole lot of controversy over whether there's five kingdoms, whether there's six, whether there's different subdivisions within some of these, whether they should be recalled something else. We're going to leave that to greater minds because your textbook says there's five kingdoms. For now, let's just assume there's five kingdoms. What you'll find useful, this classification package you've already done that first page where you get to classify some cars, sweet, but this page, variety of living things, you'll notice you are asked to give the principal distinguishing characteristics of each of the five kingdoms, and then to make sure you actually know the names of various members within those kingdoms. So, without any further ado, let's go. First kingdom are the protists, sometimes called Protista, Protoctista. These are unicellular organisms that happen to be eukaryotic. And by eukaryotic, eu means in Greek kernel, true nucleus. These cells, like yourself, have membrane-bound organelles, a true nucleus. And the key here is with the protists that they are unicellular. So if you're looking at any of these kingdoms and you find something that is unicellular and happens to be eukaryotic, chances are you're dealing with a protist. And when we do protists, you're going to see that it's a big kingdom of misfits, and this is where a lot of the controversy is. Organisms, to be alive, have to take in nutrients. It's one of the characteristics of life, so their nutrition can be a whole lot of different things. And again, this is why they tend to be misfits. Some of them are capable of photosynthesis, some of them simply absorb nutrients through their cell membrane, or some combination of those. Reproduction, again, isn't one particular fixed type of reproduction. It's both sexual and asexual. So these are examples of some of the protists. And again, this is not an actual drawing. This is an artistic rendition. This would be an amoeba. Notice these little false feet, these pseudopods that basically reach out and engulf food or materials. Another one would be Euglena. Notice it's a flagellate. It has a flagellum. Notice it's green. So this would be one of the protists that is capable of actually making its own food. It's autotrophic. It carries out photosynthesis. Paramecium is a ciliate. Call it a ciliate because, hey, look at all those little cilia. We call them basically ores. If you're classifying protists, one of the better ways of doing it is by how they get around. So ciliates use cilia. Trypanosomes tend to move around in your own bloodstream. Thank you very much. These suckers are not nice. They cause something called African sleeping sickness. They basically engulf your blood and devour your red blood cells. Your red blood cells burst, and it causes an incredible, nasty reaction in your body, and thus you appear that you're just sleeping all the time. You might even sleep all the way to your death. What a pleasant thought. So, sometimes algae are classified as plants, and sometimes they're classified as protists. For our purposes, we're going to call the algae members of Kingdom Protista. We have members like Spirogyra, which are spiral-shaped, Chlorella. Obviously, these guys are photosynthetic. They tend to exist on pond scum and all that other nice green stuff that grows in your shower. Let's move on to the prokaryotes. Prokaryota, in your textbook, they are the monerans. Notice these are not eukaryotic. This is before a nucleus, so they don't have membrane-bound organelles. Your nucleus is not, there is no nucleus. It's basically the nuclear material is contained in a nucleoid region or dispersed throughout the cytoplasm. Mostly unicellular, lack nuclear membrane because they don't have a nucleus, and mitochondria. Some chemosynthetic nutrition. Again, these are kind of cool because they can, for example, live in old tailing ponds from mines and actually break down inorganic chemicals, remove pollutants from the soil. They're good. Most of them, however, just absorb nutrients through their cell wall. Production or reproduction is asexual. They divide by binary fission. So these are the genus names, species names of some typical bacteria. Escherichia coli, E. coli for short. Bacillus subtilis, these are bacilli. They are rod-shaped bacteria. Bacillus thermophilus, these might turn up in your yogurt. Kind of cool. A lot of bacteria are important to life. You have about 40 pounds of them growing in your intestines. Without them, you would not be healthy at all. So be careful of doing too many nasty things in terms of antibiotics, cleanses, etc. that wipe out those bacteria, or you're going to have to find a way to get them back there. Right? So, Kingdom Plantae. Not everybody's favorite, but Canada's #1 recreational activity is gardening, so plants are important. Most of our food supply comes from plants. They happen to be eukaryotic, true nucleus, multicellular, unlike the protists, and they have cell walls made of cellulose. We tend to call that cell wall fiber, dietary fiber. It's good for you. They have large central vacuoles. And again, in order to carry out photosynthesis, they have chloroplasts. As I said, photosynthetic, photo, light, synthesis, to build up. So they actually build up nutrients, carbohydrates by taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, fueled by energy of the sun, and actually go through a cascade of reactions that's really quite complex but amazing in its sophistication, and turns that carbon dioxide into glucose. That's why you have salads and why you eat potatoes and all those other veggies. They're good for you. There's something in plants that is designed to confuse people. Their development basically alternates between what's called a haploid and a diploid generation. You are diploid, but your sex cells are haploid. They have half as many chromosomes. So the same thing happens in plants, but you actually see a different plant for each of those generations, where you may see in the diploid generation a tree, whereas the haploid generation happens to be in the cone. More to be said about that when we get to Kingdom Plantae. So, you've seen plants before. You've got flowering plants, and you've got non-flowering plants. These are called gymnosperms, gymno, naked seeds. And then you've got some plants which, no offense to them, but they're called primitive plants. The ferns, the moss require water, ferns require water for reproduction. We'll get there. And another kingdom, Kingdom Fungi. Eukaryotic, many nuclei distributed in the cytoplasm with occasional dividing membrane. Might want to repeat that one to yourself 3 times. Photosynthetic pigment lacking. You ever seen a green mushroom? Nah. Mushrooms, other fungi, thrive in the dark because they don't need light. They make their nutrients synthetically. No chloroplasts. Nutrition simply by absorption. And again, the fungi include the molds, yeast, mushrooms. What did one mushroom say to the other mushroom? You're sure a fungi. So there you go. A couple of other representative fungi that you may run into in the world. Kingdom Animalia. We tend to be a little bit anthropomorphic when we look at biology. We are members of Kingdom Animalia, therefore we say Kingdom Animalia is the most important. Not necessarily. Again, Kingdom Animalia includes multicellular organisms made up of eukaryotic cells, and their nutrition is basically by ingesting. You eat and you move that food into an internal cavity, usually the stomach, and from the stomach it moves through a series of tubing, small intestine, large intestine, etc., where more chemical action takes place and absorption takes place. And yeah, a lot of good stuff. Reproduction is primarily sexual, after a good Christian wedding, of course. High level of tissue differentiation. That means, unlike, say, a sponge, which would be the simplest animal, higher animals have cells which have differentiated or specialized into, say, brain cells, heart cells, kidney cells, etc. So, you all know what animals are? That's an animal. Really? That's an animal. This is a sand dollar. Well, maybe not. Looks like a sea urchin, actually. It's a kind of a poor drawing. A sea anemone. And this is the sand dollar. There you go. All animals. This looks like a nice nematode. Maybe something you'd find in raw vinegar, vinegar eel, a marine slug, sea cucumber, for instance, and a sponge. Not the kind you get at Walmart. This is a living sponge.